Why do we stop asking questions? One of the things I've been thinking about lately is this. Children ask questions constantly. Why? Because that's how they learn. Somewhere along the way, though, something changes. We begin to associate having questions with not knowing enough. We begin to think that confidence means certainty. Before long, we spend more energy trying to appear knowledgeable than we do trying to become knowledgeable. I think that's unfortunate because some of the smartest people I've ever met ask the most questions. They weren't asking because they lacked expertise. They were asking because expertise taught them there was always more to learn. I remember being in a graduate class and our professor asked a question. Everyone volunteered a different version of the same thing. I didn't answer because what they responded wasn't what I thought at all. In fact, it was nowhere near. I remember when he called my name and asked me what I thought. I told him I didn't know. And he turned around and said, "What do you mean you don't know?" I shrugged and said, "Well, I thought I knew, but what I actually think isn't at all what everyone else said." So he asked me again, and I shared my thoughts with him. And to my surprise, he slammed the table and said, "Bingo." Imagine my surprise because I doubted what I thought because everyone around me decided to have the same thought. I have never done that again because you know what? Questions make people look for answers instead of solutions. I've noticed that questions make people uncomfortable for different reasons. Sometimes a question exposes something we hadn't considered. Sometimes it challenges a decision we've already made. Sometimes it slows down a meeting that everyone wants to finish. And sometimes a question simply reminds us that the issue may be more complicated than we first thought. But what if that's exactly what good questions are supposed to do? Maybe questions aren't interruptions. Maybe they're invitations. Invitations to think more deeply, to consider another perspective, to build something better than we would have built if we'd accepted the first answer that came along. I've learned that certainty can be comforting, but curiosity is what moves us forward. Curiosity says, "Help me understand." Curiosity says, "What am I missing?" And curiosity also says, "Show me something I haven't considered." Those aren't signs of weakness. They're signs of someone who cares enough to get it right instead of simply getting it done. As I reflected on my own career, I've realized that every major shift in my thinking began with curiosity. I didn't wake up one morning with a completely different perspective. It happened one question at a time, one conversation at a time, one moment where I was willing to admit that there may be, just maybe, another way, to see what was right in front of me. I must also admit that I think being in environments where there was such a resistance for any thinking that did not align to the acceptable thought made me seek more than I would have sought had I been willing to be heard. That's the thing. Some silence you and try to get you to question your thinking because they don't want to do the work in case your thoughts are actually a solution. That's why I hope this series encourages more than agreement. I hope it encourages curiosity. I hope it encourages those of you who had a solution but felt like you weren't heard. Stay curious. Somewhere out there is an answer waiting for you to ask the right question. Stay curious. Because if you're willing to stay curious, we're much more likely to keep learning. And if we keep learning, we continue to grow. Next time, we're going to begin looking at one area where I believe curiosity matters more than ever. We're going to ask a question that has shaped much of my professional life. What if we've been asking the wrong questions about reading comprehension? I'm not going to answer that question just yet, but I hope you'll join me as we explore it together. Until next time, keep asking better questions.